Yes, welcome to my crafter's log for April and most of March, because I'm just so organised like that. We've got all of the usual crafty stuff coming up, but also I'm sure you'll share in my air of slightly hyper excitement because it is May and that means one thing. Eurovision month! Yeah, I'm a bit excited. Also, my birthday is at the end of the month, but that's a bit less exciting, although there probably will be cake. So, if you're unlucky enough to have seen my videos before, welcome back, lovely to see you, and I guess you pretty much know what to expect. If you're new here today, hello! My name is Michelle, and I'm a proud multi-crafter who loves to make all of the things and encourage you to do the same. Today's video will be more of a personal crafting catch-up, but on my channel you'll also find tutorials, free patterns, project vlogs, and just whatever else I think up at the time. Alright, let's get stuck in! So I guess the biggest thing that happened since my last update would be Dave bringing COVID into the house. 10 days before we were booked to go to Glasgow and see War of the Worlds. Now, when I was a kid, my parents let me watch The Stand at far too tender an age, and it's given me a lifelong crippling terror of everybody I know and love dying to a horrible pandemic. So, yeah, it's been a great couple of years. I immediately holed up in the craft room with an airbed and my laptop and refused to come out for the whole 10 days. I mean, that makes it sound pretty dramatic. It wasn't quite that bad. I did come out to use the bathroom sometimes. But it totally worked. I remained plague-free, we made it to Glasgow, we had a great view from our Premier Inn, which we don't normally get the good view, so that was quite fun. We saw a thoroughly entertaining musical that I definitely recommend, and also we ate some lukewarm McDonald's veggie burgers just standing in the middle of a street, because for some reason the entire of Glasgow was full up. I'd love to have some photos for you here of me actually crafting with all of the projects and supplies that I felt the need to take with us, but that also happened to be the weekend when Reddit were running their place event, and yeah, that really took over my life for a few days there, and no crafting was done whatsoever. If you know, you know. We also got to visit friends this month and see the doggos, which is getting extra important to me because they're getting up there age-wise, and I love them very, very much. This is Sparrow, and this is Cat. They live with their dad, but they will always be my babies. Cat is actually coming to stay with us for Eurovision weekend, so that just makes it even more fun. And then last Thursday night, completely out of the blue, I found myself booking emergency next day train tickets to go to York for a weekend and claim a free ticket to the Festival of Vintage. It's not necessarily my scene in terms of shopping, I just went to hang out with my bestie.
It's not a puzzle.
But actually there were a ton of handcrafted items there to perv over. I saw crochet, needlepoint, cross stitch. At one point there was even a tattered lace doily just buried under a pile of other things. How crocheted throws and shawls can still only be worth 20 quid, I do not understand, but never mind. Also, does anyone know what they used to crochet bags like this? It's almost like a cord rather than a yarn, but it's very, very smooth. I'm bad at words, but hopefully someone knows what I'm talking about. I also picked up this 60s sewing pattern for a pinafore dress. Not really sure why I picked this one, other than it just happened to catch my eye and happened to be my size. I don't know if vintage patterns are harder to work with or different in any way to modern ones, but I needed some kind of souvenir, right? So I guess we're gonna find out at some point. Apart from the shopping, there was also music and dancing, a brief selfie opportunity while we had a rest halfway around, and then the next day we found ourselves in a Cold War bunker tour because why not? Actually, that was great, and I really recommend it to anyone who finds themselves in the vicinity, although probably goes without saying it was kind of a sobering experience. York is a very pretty city, but more importantly, Annette on Instagram turned me on to the fact that they have a really good boys there, and by now most of you probably know how I feel about boys. So off we went on a pilgrimage, poking around the fabric section and discussing value for money of felt packs. Dave had come down and joined us for the day and was caught wondering if he can embed shells into dice. We wandered down the famous Shambles, which was horrifically busy, had an excellent meal in an excellent pub that was surprisingly unbusy, and after giving up trying to find a local yarn shop to visit, we headed off home. It's been a while since I did a spontaneous trip like that, but overall I would rate it 5 out of 7, which, as we all know, is a perfect score. Alright, enough of all that. You probably just want to see some cross stitch, right? At least, I assume you do. If you don't, just sort of entertain yourself for the next 10 minutes, I guess. For the rest of you, I have got a finish. Ah! Oh, that's not in frame. There we go, right in front of my face. This is, of course, Alpine by Satsuma Street, which you have watched me painstakingly work on since probably about August last year. That's just how slow a stitcher I am. Deal with it. There wasn't very much left to do at all after my last update, so I just kind of barreled on and got that done. Obviously, I have failed to iron it since, but baby steps. Baby steps. This is stitched on 14 count Aida. I can't remember the brand or the name of the colour, but knowing past me, I probably just bought literally whatever the cheapest fabric was that I could find on eBay. It is very stiff, so yeah, that checks out. Mostly called for DMC. I did sub out 1 or 2 colours, but close enough. I do have a plan to fully finish this, but it probably won't be until later in the summer, unfortunately. I'm trying to do this thing where I don't give myself a ton of goals all at one time, you know? Healthy adult coping mechanisms, woo! I'm gonna put this down because my arm is hurting. I've said before that Jodie Rice, the designer behind Satsuma Street, is basically the reason I got into cross stitch. Her patterns are just so happy and colourful, and because they're mostly in this blocky style, it makes for some real good mindless stitching that you just don't have to think too much about. In fact, the first cross stitch pattern that I ever bought for myself back in 2015 was one of hers. It was Garden Cat. Unfortunately, I made some tactical errors, and this is as far as I ever got with that. I was very new. I thought I had this amazingly comprehensive stash of embroidery floss, and it turns out I probably had about 20 colours and then wondered why I didn't have any of the called for ones for this pattern. So instead of being the pleasurable, relaxing stitch that it should have been, it actually ended up with all of these dodgy colour substitutions and bizarre blends that just do not work at all. And then, if memory serves, I also made a counting error as well. I can't remember where. And it's probably not that big a deal nowadays, but to me, back in the day, it was a deal breaker. So this ended up on the hibernating pile. I have long planned to rescue this project once Alpine was done. So this is actually my task for the next couple of weeks. I need to sit down with it, figure out which of the called for colours I actually own now that I have a much more extensive stash, which of the substitutions I like, if any, and which of the blends I will be picking out. Spoiler, the green and blue in the sun there. What even is that? Newbie's gonna noob. So yeah, there was some talk on Instagram of perhaps doing a Satsuma Street start along, but if we go ahead and do that, I think I might be doing it as a restart along, because I just really want to have this project done. It's so nostalgic. We'll see how bad it is when I get really stuck into it. The other project you've been seeing a lot of recently is Autumn Stories from Pain-Free Crafts. This is my first attempt at full coverage, and I really wasn't sure whether I would enjoy it or not. Let's see where we were in my last update. And this is where we are now. I got my first ever full coverage page finish, and you can see I've gotten into the way more interesting colours of the tree now. I've also started on the next page, you can see down at the bottom there. But I have to admit, this one hasn't really seen any action in a few weeks. Nothing personal towards it, I still very much am enjoying it, it's just I have a lot of other things on the go and it hasn't been priority. That's just the nature of non-monogamous stitching, right? It's absolutely beautiful though. I can't get over how great those reds and oranges look. I'm gonna give you another look. If I manage to finish this sometime in the next 10 years, I hope we still have green living room walls, because that is gonna look stunning hanging up on green. This is stitched 2/1 on 28 count ecru even weave. Last time we discussed that tent stitch actually has a real meaning and a very strict way of doing it, and that's definitely not what I'm doing. So my version is more of a whatever makes sense at the time stitch, and I'm okay with that. Regardless of terminology, it's basically just half cross stitches. I don't know if you can really see, they're very tiny, but you do not need the full cross to get good coverage on this fabric. You might just have to trust me on that, depending how clear that was. I can't remember if I said this last time, I might just be repeating myself, which is quality content, but I've really taken to full coverage in a big way. There was a bit of a wobble early on when I was trying to do the typical 10x10 parking blocks, but now I'm doing it cross-country across one page at a time and then parking, and it's just so fun. If you are struggling to get on with full coverage, I recommend giving that a go as an option. It might work for you the same way it's worked for me. I don't know, but I like it. Do I wish I had more progress on that one? Yes, obviously, but it's a very, very, very long-term project, and I've kind of made my peace with that now. Okay, my next whip is one that I'd started in time for the March update, but have since frogged and restarted. It's the Peppermint Purple Year of Blackwork Sal. I'll put up a picture of the situation from last month. Basically, I'd found this awesome variegated colourway that I really liked, but I worried that the pale pink was too pale on my white fabric. Some kind but firm commenters let me know that in fact it was way too pale and what was I even thinking. So I frogged it and went into a bit of a huff because from the colours available on the website I was using, that was the only one I'd really liked. And then... boys. Best shop in the world. So I went in for some emergency 310 and what did they happen to have? A much bigger selection of DMC's variegated threads. Last time I was trying to decide whether you pronounced it colorous or coloris, and Ilonka popped up in the comments to tell me that actually those were both wrong and I was an idiot. Unfortunately, I can't remember what she said was the correct pronunciation, but also I've watched about 10 other videos now to try and find how other people are saying it, and it turns out we are all doing it wrong, so I just don't even care anymore. Anyway, this is the new colourway I've picked up. I hope you can see that. I can't even see my screen. There we go. Featuring this lovely dragon needle minder that I got as a gift from Amber, Rogue Mama Stitcher. If you do not watch Amber, you definitely should be. So this colourway is more of a purple, grey and brown, which doesn't sound super appealing, but if you look, it's more of a kind of warm coppery brown, and the grey reads kind of like a navy blue when you see it next to the purple, so yeah, it's much prettier than it sounds from a description. I've managed to catch up on all of January and a bit of February. Obviously I am still quite far behind on this, but as I've said before, it's such an easy one to catch up on that I'm just not stressed about it at all. Makes for a nice easy stitch when you're just watching wholesome Lego building competition shows on TV. Also, we still don't talk about why it's on this giant roll of fabric, it just is, okay? I'm excited for this next one. Are you excited? Well, I guess probably not, because you don't know what it is. Let's see. Last year I started the Pixels That Made Us Sal, a charity stitch-along designed by PicStitch. It is huge. It has about 200 colours I think, and I just had no idea what I was getting myself into when I signed up to this. A few months later and it was like pulling teeth. I was not getting along with this project at all, so it went onto the hibernating pile. But in my last update I promised you that it would be going back into active rotation. Here is my current progress. Featuring, in fact, another cute little needle minder gift from Amber, Rogue Mama Stitcher. It's really hard for you to see small differences in this pattern. For example, just last night I actually finished off 3 colours in the A, but one of the colours only had like 3 stitches to it. It's a lot slower progress than you'd think because so much time is spent faffing around, fastening off and changing the colours. Still, the main blocker on this project hasn't been the stitching. The main problem was that the supplies that I kitted up for it last year have since been cannibalised for other projects, and they were just everywhere, with no rhyme or reason. So I had to spend quite a lot of time redoing a spreadsheet of supplies, rounding up skeins of floss from all over the house, and just re-establishing a system to keep me on track this time. I'm happy to say I have done that, and I've managed to start stitching, obviously. Yeah, so there isn't a huge amount of progress to see on this, but now my brain is treating it as an active project again, so that's the main thing. Unfortunately, I have to say I do still kind of hate it. I curse past me for going 3 strands, but I still really desperately want it to be done and want to have that finished piece because it is an absolute stunner. Also, this project taught me how much I absolutely despise this kind of isolated confetti stitching, and a learning experience is never a total waste. Right? My last Stitchy Whip is not exactly a secret because I literally had you vote on the colours for it on Instagram and TikTok. But it is for a secret project. So I'm just going to waft this across the screen and say no more of it. I am so mysterious. Okay, that was quite a lot of stitching stuff actually by my standards, but I have to say this time round, yarn crafts have taken a dive, neatly illustrating my claim that I get crochet frenzy in the winter and then cross-stitch hype in the summer. In fact, the one single knitting project that I'm even working on actively is my drippity drop socks, and also actively is a bit of a stretch if I'm honest. I've just gone to fish that project out of its project bag, and instead I have these command strips. You may have seen on Instagram at the weekend that one thing I haven't mentioned so far about our York trip is that my boot sole fell off and we had to double back to a Sainsbury's local and buy whatever adhesive they happened to have in order to fix it. We are resourceful, independent women after all. Socks are always my go-to travel project, so this bag has actually been around everywhere with me. Glasgow, York, wherever I've been. Unfortunately, I just haven't had much of an urge to knit once I've got there, so I did manage to finish off the first sock, which if you recall, I was just finishing off last time. And I've also managed to start the second sock, and I got a few rows into the leg of it on the train to York last week. I still think this yarn is the best thing about the project, because how could you not? It's beautiful. So that is Drippity Drop Socks by K.F. Jones in Fear of the Dark by Castleview Yarns. And that's about all I have to say about that. It has just started absolutely pouring down outside, so if there's suddenly rain noise, I apologise. I ain't re-recording this. Now, maybe a bit more surprisingly than with knitting, but I also only have one active crochet project. I don't even know why I started this one. It was when I was isolating in the craft room and I think I just needed something to keep me sane. So I was looking at this giant bag of lace weight ivory yarn that I happen to have. Don't ask. And I was looking at free patterns and I came across the Better World dress by a designer whose name I'm not going to butcher, but I'll put it up on the screen for you now. This dress isn't designed for lace weight, but I figured I could make it work. And the plan would be to dye the final dress, maybe some kind of gradient effect? I don't know if I could pull that off. I need to do some research into dyeing things. The gist of the pattern is that the designer asks you to donate to a charity of your choice when you post about the finished item on social media, hence the name, the Better World dress. Unfortunately, it's very lacy, so there's not a huge amount for you to see. This is my progress so far. I'll stretch it out a bit so you can sort of make some sense of it. Woohoo! I absolutely blazed through the early part of this in that first week when I was sitting upstairs with nothing else to do, but I have to admit it's dropped off a bit since. We're at the point where I don't even know if it'll ever be finished, but it's certainly saved me dwelling while I was stuck upstairs. It may be officially the Better World dress, but I think I'm going to refer to this one as my coping through crochet dress instead. And now to the miscellaneous other crafts section, because you know what I'm like. Sewing has been a big deal for me lately. I want to really push myself and get past this fearful beginner stage that I have been stuck in for so long. And to that end, I'm just going crude exposure therapy. I'm calling it my summer of sewing. And if any of you out there also fear sewing and would like to join me, you are more than welcome. First up, I joined the Sew Frugal challenge and I made a very quick, very unprofessional dress that nevertheless kind of worked out alright-ish. I don't have the dress to hand, so I'll just show you some photos, but also I did record a project vlog. I will link that at the end of the video and you can check it out if you're interested in seeing more about this dress or the Sew Frugal challenge itself, or just what it was like living for 10 days on an airbed in my craft room. Spoiler, it smelled weird. The pattern is actually a YouTube tutorial by Rin from Sew in Love, and it's called the Boho Kimono Dress. I do like this dress, but the problem is the fabric isn't hugely me. It's a plain navy viscose that I picked up for cheap last year, and it had just sort of been sitting around doing nothing because the original plan for it fell by the wayside. So I am glad that I found a use for it, and it is really soft and nice, and to be honest, in summer, comfort is all I care about because I'm a creature of the night and I do not do well in the heat. And then somehow, despite not being entirely taken with the outcome of that one, I decided the best thing to do was to jump straight into another Instagram sewing challenge. This time it was the Sawport Ukrainian Designers Sew Along hosted by the wonderful Helga and Nicole as part of the Sew Over 50 community. Now you can hopefully tell that I am not over 50 myself, but luckily they were welcoming anybody, and since it was for a good cause, why not give it a go, right? A pattern had already been chosen, this asymmetric single-pleated skirt by Ukrainian designer Tatiana, and I think by the time I signed up there were about 40 of us committed to making this skirt. The hope was that by all of us buying the pattern from Etsy and shining a light on one Ukrainian creative, we were helping someone out financially in an albeit small way, but we were also keeping what's going on in Ukraine top of mind for ourselves and for anyone who saw our posts. It was such a weird feeling. Like, I'm there craft goblining around on the floor, making this beautiful skirt and thinking of all the fun things I'm going to wear it to, and the person who designed it is literally like going through things that I am lucky enough that I can't even fully imagine. I don't know, I'm not the most articulate, but hopefully you know what I mean. It was just a little bit surreal. And now that I've brought the mood down to rock bottom, here's a pretty skirt. See what I mean? It's weird. You can't see much here. I'll put up some photos as well. This is made from a viscose polyester mix that I got from Minerva. I believe it was listed as their core range suiting fabric, but I'll link to the exact stuff in the description. It was available in a few different colours as well, but black and grey just speak to my very darkened soul, so as soon as I saw it, I knew. This is, without a doubt, the most successful sewing project I have done in terms of outcome. It's going to sound weird, but it just feels like a real skirt. I don't know if I can really show you. Even just the waistband just seems like a real thing. That is not... There we go. I don't know, it just feels sturdy. I can hike it up over my hips and yank up the zipper on the back, and I just don't even have to worry about it falling apart. You'd think that would be a bare minimum with sewn garments, but in my experience, things have been a little more precarious. I think if I saw that in a shop, I wouldn't even look twice. Absolutely over the moon with it. I did that! Technically, I did muck up the hem. It's got a bit of a wobble to it. I don't know if you can really see. So I'll probably unpick that and do it again at some point, but also I'm lazy, so I might just not. I already wore it to York at the weekend, and I can't say anybody was coming up to me and giving me grief about my wobbly hem. Either way, this skirt will be getting a ton of wear. I love it. Okay, finally, you may or may not remember, quite a while ago now I did a video about attempting to make my own resin needle minders using some laser cut wood blanks that I happen to have lying around. It sort of worked, but at the same time it sort of didn't work at all. So it's time for round 2. This time I am working with a range of 3D printed blanks and also air dry clay experiments. Bosh. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. I am filming the entire process, and if it works out well, maybe there'll be a project vlog / tutorial video, and if it doesn't work out well, maybe there'll be some kind of hilarious blooper reel. One or the other. And now, I've got someone who would really love to pop in and tell you all about his own crafts. Unfortunately, he's a real grown-up and he's at work right now, so we'll just have to film his section later and pop it in. I'm sure it's gonna be seamless. Alright, you are live. He's trying to say hello.
I'm not very good on camera.
Wave to the people, David.
Hello, everybody. It's
there
me.
We go.
Today I'm here to talk about my craft, dice making. I feel as if we should have like a intro music, like the dice segment intro music.
Maybe if you come back another time.
Oh, I didn't realise this was an audition.
Oh my god.
I'm going to talk about the dice that I've made in the month of April.
Stop looking at me for permission.
So the first set of dice was an experiment of sorts, and I was using a technique called hydro dipping, which is where you take a reservoir of water and drip special ink, which is kind of like nail varnish but costs a lot more, onto the top of the water, and that forms a kind of sticky film, and then you lower your dice, your blank dice, through the film, and the film sticks to it, and what you end up with is something like this. The dice are made with a kind of shell technique where you print out a dice using a 3D printer that doesn't have any numbers on it. and then you apply the hydro dipping technique to the blank dice, and then you put the blank dice into a normal dice mould, and then fill the normal dice mould with clear resin, and that forms this weird kind of shell effect. There's another one. I like this one so much, because when we were doing these, we just kind of experimented with all the different colours. I like the yellow, black and red one so much, I decided to make an entire set out of that one. And I love these ones. They're so cool. The next set was another experiment, and the experiment that we did for the next two sets, in fact, is something called the Petri dish method. It's a method where you take a half-full dice mould filled with resin, coloured resin, and then you drip ink of various different weights and densities on top of the resin, and that forms these small kind of globules. Globules, is that a term?
That is not a thing.
Small kind of drips on the top of the resin, and they sink down and form these weird, creepy, biological-looking tendrils inside the resin of the dice. It makes a set that's weirdly alien-looking. So I did one set in that teal and brown colour, and that looks like kind of small terraria. And I also did one in a more green set. Final set, I wanted to do something a bit lighter, because the last few sets have been quite dark and dingy and depressing and dank.
Dank like memes.
Dank like memes.
Oh.
The last set are these weird, floaty, cloudy, pretty, pastel shade unicorn type dice. I asked my capable dice assistant what to ink them, and she very astutely pointed out that these needed something quite bold that stood out from the light colouring. So there's one that I've inked already.
Also sparkly. It had to be sparkly.
Sorry, yeah, it had to be sparkly and fit with the unicorn theme. And I think they've turned out quite nice. And that's all I've been doing this month, the month of April. Tune in next month for May's Dice Update.
Remember, if you've enjoyed this video so far, please do give it a thumbs up because that helps it reach other people who might also enjoy it. And consider subscribing if you'd like to see more waffly videos like this, and also some that are actually of some use. So, plans for May. You might be surprised that I haven't mentioned any kind of month-long challenge in this video so far, and that is because every single craft in May runs a challenge, and I can never keep up with even one of them, never mind all of them. So this year I am just saying no. Instead, I'm going to give myself a few little goals that bring all my crafts together just like I used to in these crafters logs, and we'll see where we get to. I could call it Michelle May. May. That's not egotistical at all. Yeah, we'll go with that. Basically, the gist is this. While everyone else is starting 1,000,001 new cross-stitch projects, I will be figuring out the situation with Garden Cat and also catching up through at least March on the Peppermint Purple Blackwork Sal. While everyone is wearing and taking photos of their me-made wardrobe every single day, I'll just be wearing some of my favourites, thinking about the gaps left between them, and putting together a list of the sort of knitting, crochet and sewing patterns I want to be on the lookout for, as part of my long-term goal of a self-made capsule wardrobe. While everyone else is working on complicated refashions of old sewing projects, I will be attempting to dye a hand-me-down lacy top that I don't really wear. Bit basic, but that still counts as a refashion, and we've got to start somewhere, right? While everyone else is not caring about Eurovision at all beyond maybe watching the grand final for an hour and complaining about politics, I will be trying to decide which country I'm officially supporting in time to buy a giant flag without relying on expensive next-day delivery. Currently the frontrunners are France, Latvia and Poland, and I have no idea which to pick. If you are into Eurovision, I'd love to know who you're supporting, and if you are not into it, what are you even doing with your life? And also at the end of the month, it is my birthday, and I would love to try decorating a really, really, really fancy cake. I'll let you know how that goes. That about sums it up. I feel like I've talked for a really long time. So all I'll say is thanks very much for joining me. I sometimes feel like I've left out a lot of important info, so if you have any questions about any of my projects or about what Eurovision even is, just ask. I hope you're able to find things to look forward to this month, and if you are taking part in any of those big challenges in whatever craft you happen to do, best of luck. Here are a couple of past videos that we've mentioned today, just in case you want to check those out. I'll see you soon for some more crafty nonsense, so in the meantime, have a brilliant rest of your day and keep making cool stuff.